We're going daily with these issues about what's going on in history and what has went on in history and how does it affect today and how does today look in the eyes of history. And so most recently, I'm just going to go start off with this one here. You've seen a video from a woman on MSNBC when she said basically Christian white nationalists are the ones that believe God is the one who gives rights. And when I heard it, of course, thousands of pundits did something on it where it was like, oh, what? That's just what Christians believe. And what? That's just this. I'm going to show you some things that make it for her to understand that citizens are supposed to believe this. Not Christian white nationalists, not just American weirdos, not all these other things. Actually, the citizen is supposed to believe that because that's the foundation and bedrock of America. Benjamin Franklin once said, freedom is not a gift bestowed upon us by other men, but rather the laws of God and of nature. John Dickinson, who went out and fought in the Revolution, didn't sign the Declaration of Independence, wasn't really for it at first, but ended up eventually fighting. He said kings or parliaments could not give us rights essential to happiness. He said we claim them from a higher source, from the King of Kings and the Lord of all the earth. He said they're not given to us or annexed to us by parchments or seals. He says they are created in us by the decrees of providence. You hear that? They're created in us by the decrees of providence, which establish the laws of our nature. They're born with us, they exist with us, and cannot be taken from us without first taking our lives. John Adams, let me go with another one, another founding father, second president of the United States. He said, you have rights antecedent, way before any earthly government, rights that cannot be repealed or restrained by human laws, rights derived from the great legislator of the universe. Do you notice the theme here? And I do this class, it's called Time Warp 1776. And what I'm trying to get to across here today is it's not just Christian nationalists, and be careful that they're labeling you these titles. I don't accept those titles. You know what I am? I'm an American citizen. I read the documents for what it says, our founding documents, and I say, that's the way they wanted America. That's the way we should have America. The reason they wrote the Bill of Rights, is very simple. These were a list of thou shalt nots against the federal government. And most people don't even realize that why we have these Bill of Rights is because we've seen governments go tyrannical in history. I just want to read to you guys the preamble to the Bill of Rights. And most people don't even know that the Bill of Rights had a preamble, but I want you to see this, okay? The conventions of a number of states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution, expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. The reason the Bill of Rights was written so is that government would not abuse its own power. And what has government done so far? It's been abusing its own power. Why? Because people believe that rights come from government. That's why you see many people clamoring for education payments. They want people to pay for abortions. They want people to pay for certain medical issues. Those aren't rights. Those are needs. Now, is there a necessity for the medical industry? Yes. But that when you can't afford it, that's when nonprofit organizations and churches and those kinds of things come to play. Do you know how I know that? Most hospitals were named after some kind of saint for a long time because they belonged to the church. So when people couldn't afford health care, they would go to the church. The church would provide that health care service. Now it's taken over by government. You see government regulating a lot of it, and now they're skyrocketing insurance because nobody's regulating that industry. Not that I'm saying there should be regulation, but if there was more competition in a free market society the way that our founders intended it, we wouldn't have half of these issues. And so what you're seeing is this woman wanted to show you that it's a weirdo mentality to think that God gives you rights. You know what's a weirdo mentality? Thinking that man is above other men, giving you your just due. Doesn't that sound like something we used to practice in this country for about 200 and some odd years? Something like slavery, when man thought that they had rights over you. Man thought they were more perfect than you. They could run and balance their... Matter of fact, isn't it crazy that the rulers think that they know more than you, that our presidents, Senate, all these guys are now dictating what you should think, how you should believe? That is called slavery. That is called oppression. That is called tyranny. And the more they push that narrative, the more you become dependent on government if you start to believe it, right? I'm going to show you another thing about the Bill of Rights. This is not a declaration of rights, but a list of prohibitions against the federal government. Rights that come from God is something that government can't touch. That's what they knew. As a matter of fact, William Blackstone wrote a 4-volume work from 1765 to 1769 called The Commentaries on the Laws of England. He actually said that no enactment of law can be considered law unless it conforms to the law of God. And when he wrote this, we used a lot of his works for our jurisprudence for over 100 years when America first formed. We knew that no law could be created to destroy the rights God gave us. That is tyranny. We left England for that. So for them to say that our rights don't come from God already proves to you where their mindset is. They want to enslave you, and they're doing a really good job at it. Now, you may think I'm weird about that. I don't really care. I just know when I see tyranny, like what happened in 2020, we knew right away when the government said we need to shut things down, we knew exactly where they were going. And we called it out in our first podcast of the year that this is tyrannical, what they're doing. And guess what? It proved to be right. It was tyrannical, what they did. They should have never touched business. They should have never told you you had to wear a mask or get a vaccine. That's called tyranny. A second point of the Bill of Rights is the founders didn't want the federal government to be a watchdog over the state's duty to protect individual rights. This was a safeguard even against the states to come against your rights, that the states could not interfere with these rights. The states could not determine when life begins or ends. They couldn't determine when your property or how you handled your property or your liberty. That we were free to purchase things. We were free to have property. We were free to own what we wanted to own. And then the state could actually go in there and say, hey, this is how we do it, and this is what your land property is, and all these other things. So what are we saying? Is it a Christian nationalist view, or is it just an American citizen that believes God gives me rights? And I'm promising you this, if more citizens catch on to the fact that God gives us rights, then we have someone to appeal to. Then we can say, Lord, there's nothing we can do against a conglomerate giant like that. You must intervene like you did for our founders. And that's when he begins to show up. The less we give honor to God for what he's done. As a matter of fact, you probably live in a state where your preamble says, we give thanks to Almighty God for the blessings of freedom and liberty. 43 states have that. The less we give obedience to God, the less we acknowledge God, the giver of rights, the less we're going to understand why we even have a constitution in the first place. And the bottom line is, if you study any kind of civilization in history, Germany, Russia, all these other things, they want to do this to rewrite the constitutions. Germany rewrote their constitution and it destroyed that country. Every country that wants to come after a freedom sense of constitution wants to rewrite it. So the more they can get this lingo that you're a democracy, not a republic, that we don't have rights that come from God, they actually come because we just all want rights. That's a destructive thing to say. And I want to say this too. If we understand Amendment number 10, that the states have more power than the federal government, why are these pundits talking about rights and where they come from when we don't even talk about the individual states and their authority? That's in the Bill of Rights, that the states held the power because the people are in the states, that the power of the federal government rests in those who elect them. The more they tell you that it doesn't come from God, the less power and authority you have. Because when they wrote this, they said the people will have supreme authority over the government. We, the people of the United States. God ordained that for that to be read. Now people say, that's not biblical, that's not Christian, that's not in the Bible. Never said it was. I'm saying the founders depended on the view that the people needed to hold the authority against their government and make sure that rights were protected and secured by government. That's Romans 13. You can look this up yourself. I don't care. Go ahead and look it up. Romans 13 talks about that. My point, rights don't come from government. They can't. If they do, they can take them away. And what are you seeing today? How come other rights are growing, such as healthcare, abortions, all these other things, but your gun rights are being taken away? Your Fourth Amendment's being taken away. Your Fifth Amendment's being taken away. Your First Amendment's being stripped. They're going after those